Right, so I'll say welcome again. And I was just saying, you know, that this is a assessor that with a short multiple choice exam. How short? Half an hour, right? And how much exam? Sorry, how much questions? 20 questions, 20. You have to get 14 and over correct to pass. Again, the last time we ran this, it had 100% as well. I was saying the process safety is not, you know, normal for the process safety to get 100, but this had 100%, and there was actually a student here in this school that got 100. Right, she's actually in the diploma. She was actually yesterday. We had diploma orientation. She was actually in that orientation yesterday, right? So it's not that hard. Just before I start, I want to make a start like now, right? Because don't want to waste, because we all know each other anyway, and you all know the school and you know whatever it is, right? I just had this in the background, if you all could see the NEBOSH page to show you where your certificate is at. So this falls under award, environmental awareness at work. Of course, a lot of you all have done the incident investigation here, and well, process safety, those of us who did that, process would have been under certificates, right? So the process, look at here, right, fall under the certificate level, meaning that it's a higher level anyway. This is what we call a level 2 certificate. You know, so I mean, I wouldn't say no stress. At the end of the day, there is still a multiple choice exam, but I was saying there that they do repeat questions. So what I would try to do, well, I had to cover some content first, right? I wanted to cover some content first today. And I would send you, I guess, you know, a paper this week. We can look at some questions as the weeks go by. I think this may take about 4 sessions. The reason why I said that, when we did it face to face, it was like half day long then. You know, when I say half day, like back when it was face to face teaching would start 9 o'clock and finish about 12, right? That's probably roughly about 3 hours there. But then that didn't include, you know, like a break time, right? 10:30 we should give a break, or 10 o'clock we'll give a break. I think we should start 8:30. Come to think of it, I think we should start class 8:30. Yes, we should start 8:30. So then that roughly carries us into 4 hours. So, you know, I think it would take us about 4 sessions, right? So without any further ado, let's get into the slide. If you have any questions, please ask. And you could just jump in, right? It's a small class. I mean, yesterday, I mentioned we had a diploma orientation yesterday. Huge class, 20-something students, right? Plus, you know, in yesterday's class. But this is a pretty small one. Let me see, if I take out myself and Janet, then we would just be with 6 persons, right? So you all can jump in anyway. I was actually telling my son yesterday, I have well, he's 9 years now. I mean, years go by fast anyway, that they were studying pollution and thing in school. And, you know, I mean, like I was telling him that I was going to teach environmental today. I don't know what happened there. You all are still seeing the PowerPoint? I've seemed to have lost, they say screen sharing has closed, right? Let me just do that again, right? Oh, my PowerPoint actually closed off, right? I have to go and get it back. Just give me a minute there, right? Hopefully it works. If not, I'll just teach from the book. I was saying that the first part of it is about, you know, pollution, and it's a very good course because it does cover some of the basics to safety and environment, right? But it also covers some deep stuff like ISO 14001. It covers environmental auditing, something called environmental impact and aspect, right? And some of those things are very much to what the environmental diploma is, right? What view are you seeing on your screen? I'm just assuming that you all are not seeing the viewers yet. You're seeing what on your screen?
Just the thumbnails, the folders for the different things, case studies, leaflets.
Okay, well then, okay, right. I had to ask because I am actually not seeing that, right? I am actually seeing the PowerPoint, but I had in mind you all were not seeing it, right? Let me just try to show it again. Right, and you let me know if you're seeing the PowerPoint now. Wonder what would have caused that to happen though. Are you all seeing element 1, foundation of environment? Yeah. Okay, good. All right, let me just. This is actually NEBOSH software, right? This course in particular, right, is written by NEBOSH. In other words, and I did not write these slides. You know, some of the courses I write them. You normally know my slides because they are more detailed. But I wouldn't put it on the big view. Maybe that was the issue. I tried to blow it up a bit and it sort of logged me out, right? So I'll just kind of keep it at that view. Hopefully you are not looking at a phone because I'll keep it at that view. I think is when I went to put it on the larger view, it sort of threw me off, right? So sometimes they do have these things with their software, right? So let's go into this. There will be places for questions, and again, whenever there is a passive question, I would slow down and kind of let you all know, right? So foundations of environmental awareness, the learning outcomes. I'm just going to go to it, right? So you should be able to identify the meaning of the environment, weather, climate, habitat, ecosystems, biodiversity, pollution, and sustainability. Now, again, I think some of us haven't done, schooling before. You'd be familiar with some of those words anyway, right? If not, I mean, it's on the slide, so we'll do it as well, right? Identify the importance and benefits of sustainable development. Identify an environmental management system, main components, and the certification process. So that would be ISO 14001, right? And that is like the toughest kind of questions anyway on this for the exam. But then again, those of us who did, process safety, you'll be familiar with multiple choice. The answers are right there looking at you. The hardest thing is to figure out if there's a close answer, which one it will be, right? So just the first slide, what is the environment? I would be using the book a little bit, right? Whenever there's a book, those who know me, you know that, I would try to use it because if we don't use it, it never gets used, right? But I wouldn't use it right now. I want to cover some slides first, right? And then we'll get into it. So the environment is everything that surrounds us. One of the fascinations of studying the environment is the breadth of topics and disciplines that are involved. Take a moment to write down what makes up the environment around you. But we should all know that. Anybody knows the answer for that? I mean, there's a couple of things around you that make up the environment. Everybody should know them anyway. Anyone want to kind of say, if remember any, or you know any? Shout any of those answers.
Obviously, the air.
Right, very good, right? So the air, basically air, water, and land, right? So I want to go back to the middle point there. They say one of the fascinations of studying the environment is the breadth of topics and disciplines that are involved, right? Now, I mean, you all know me as a safety person, right? But I guess if you go further back than that, what probably most of you all don't know is that I have a degree in environmental engineering. Remember, I don't normally say my degrees, but you all know I have 3 degrees. One being a master's degree in safety, right? But I don't know if you all know that. I already don't tell people that. That was like my first ever degree, right? So I have a degree in environmental engineering. And the point of saying that is not to tell you not about me, but to tell you that other than the safety side of me, right, that there are different things you can study in the environment then, right? If that was your liking, right? I just to let you know that, I mean, there are courses you can do then that will teach you to do things like water testing, something called BOD, biological oxygen demand testing, COD, chemical oxygen testing, but demand testing, DO, dissolve testing. And they wonder, well, why do we need to know that? You probably don't need to know it. I'm just saying that that's one of the fascinations then that you can do different things and you do get work. The environmental field. I know Joel Cummins has always asked me, he is one of those persons telling me to offer the environmental diploma. But the thing is, one of the downsides to Trinidad and Tobago is that you don't get much work with an environmental degree. So with those courses I mentioned, the BOD, COD, DO testing, you can be employed like in Kaizen and, Power Gen and wherever there's a lab, right? Maybe state-owned labs like Kuriri, right? So they do have work, right, for people in the environmental field and not just the safety field. But the thing is, though, to be honest with you, that field is very much the pay and the salary is not. I mean, if it's like a technician at Kaizen, I don't know if you wanted me to tell you the salary because it's not very good, right? It's not more than $6,000, right? So the folks who have done, like me, and I'm talking from experience, who did environmental degrees, the sphere of employment then is not like every company have a safety. it's not like that, because every company does not have an environmental facility or an environmental lab. Quite frankly, what we see is that it's like what you're doing here is like the safety is the main thing and the environment is just the add-on to be a HSE officer then, right? But to say as if we are really going to work in a lab, for those who like that part of it, right? I mean, there is work, but the thing is that the thing number one is to get in. You have also the EMA. For those who know, the EMA have, officers working for them. You also have the IME, right? I tell you the things in Trinidad that I know, right? I know, but these people do not get very big salaries. A lot of them leave it for the safety. Haven't done like an environmental degree, they come across in safety and they get employed as safety persons. But if that is your fascination, that you do so want to protect the environment and get employment by that, there are jobs. It's just that it's not very, like someone is a technician would probably stay there, right? There are people who I know in power gen like 15 years ago and they're still in power gen, right? So like they don't really leave. Including the EMA and the IMA, right? State-owned companies anyway. I mean, those who leave go into safety, but those who like it and they stay, they kind of stay there. So they sphere then if you do an environmental course, like a degree is not as large as safety. So I would often say that these things then are sufficient, these shorter courses are sufficient to qualify you to be, yes, Joel, I said the Hannah Committee just to qualify you to do some environmental risk assessments and stuff, which is needed by STO. But just to put it out there that there are environmental courses that you can do. I mean, mine, I had specialized in so much of different things, right? I don't want to call them now. Soil mechanics was one. A lot of maths. Hydrogeology was one. To tell you the breadth then of topics somebody could study. I had done hydrogeology. I had done one of my, like, you can put it like what you majored in at that degree level. Mine was in coastal engineering. To tell you so much of topics, I just called three for you that if you like those things, soil mechanics, which is maths, is like maths, hydrogeology, and they could call more for you, coastal engineering, right? And so that, I would say if you have the time, do that, but to say do it for work in Trinidad, probably not. Joel.
Companies like Rose and Jarek and they who specialize more environmental, a lot of money can be made with this environmental certification where you learn to do the environmental impact assessment, taking, let me see what you call these things, using the crocons, the gas monitors. These things tend to fall under the environmental aspect of things.
Yes.
Right. So there is a cash flow in certain parts of it, at least from my experience.
Yeah, I mean, yes, yes, there is. I mean, you mentioned Rose's. I mean, Rose is more or less job oriented, right? But then how much technicians does Rose Environmental have? The good ones that are there are staying there. That's the point I was trying to make. It's not as if you have a graduate class of 20 environmental students that they'd all be employed. Quite frankly, they all come across in safety because the wider employment base and then is in safety as opposed to the environment. But as I said, if you are here and you like it, fine, you can do further courses in that. More or less at the technician level, because that is where the employment is at, where you can physically do things like the water quality testing. That's what Rose looking for. That's what Kaizen looking for, that you have the application. That's what EMA looking for, to use those machines there, right? To use those meters, to use the lab and whatever have you. But, like I said, I do know technicians at Kaizen. I do know them complaining. Right now I have, believe it or not, I should probably say this, right? One of the girls that was on our, I did mention two of them just now. I said there were two persons in process safety that got work. One of them was actually in this class. I don't know if anybody remember Precious, if Joel or anybody remember Precious here. Precious got work at Kaizen, but to say if the salary is huge, the answer is no, right? But it is work, right? It is work at the same time. And, quite frankly, it's just a matter like, if you like it, then fine. If not, you move on into the safety field, right? But I spoke about that to tell you this slide is true. Let me go back to it, that there is a breadth of topics. When I say breadth, it's like a wide span of environmental topics. And what about wastewater engineering? What about things like wastewater engineering? You can probably do that and get into places like WASA, right? But the thing is, the thing is like the folks who are there, they're there. right? Those who like it, and they stay in there, and basically they'll make, you know, a career out of that. So it's very hard to get in here, including the IME and the EME, right? Those who are there, state-owned companies, they stay, those who like it anyway, right? All right, the environment, so back to this thing here, just said that to tell you that definitely the environment has a wider range of topics to study with a degree level as compared to safety. Safety is just, you know, like one stream then, but environment, you could actually, you know, specialize in, you know, technician level. We mentioned that before, coastal engineering, all of those things anyway, wastewater management, air pollution. But the thing is to get into a job, right? So back to the environment. So think about the air you're breathing, the room or space you are occupying, the people who are around you, and the things you can hear and smell. Next, whether you live in a town or city or the countryside, what are the characteristics of the region where you are based? What other living things such as plants and animals exist around you? So anyway, let me give you the moral. The moral of the story here is that it's based on the environment that you are in. It's going to affect the, like, the characteristics of the region then. And the characteristics of the region, I'll tell you what I'm talking about just now, is going to affect the plants and animal that is living around you, right? Plants and animals that are living around you. So I guess if you are from this part of the world, you know, the tropics, you know, we are very much diverse. And I'm not talking about people here, I'm talking about plants and animals as compared to like the cooler countries then, right? The more temperate countries where you don't find so much of vegetation, right? If you bring anybody, if you all know anyone from away and, you know, maybe it was the first time in the Caribbean, the first thing they will tell you is that it's very lush, right? It's very lush here, and you kind of have to travel to see the opposite side to that because, you know, in the cooler countries, it's not that dense then, right? So when we spoke about the environment, they could be different characteristics like tropics, non-tropical, etc. And then based on the characteristic of the region, it's going to affect different plants and animals anyway, right? So as much as we are familiar with our local trees, you know, like our local vegetation, you know, like coconut trees and mango trees. And this is so commonplace in Trinidad. You bring a foreigner here, they'll be amazed to see it. And likewise, if you go away, you would not see those things, right? You would not, that's like one of the things you'll pick up in the, I guess, in the foreign countries that like there's no coconut tree. Of course, if it's not Florida, we're talking about and Hawaii and stuff, right? But you know, like you can look out your window and you're gonna see coconut trees, you're gonna see mango trees. So yeah, I mean, these things do affect the different plants, and then those in turn affect the different animals we have around you, right? So I'm gonna share too much of my experience, I'll move on, right? So we are all inhabitants of a single planet. Apparently, some of us don't realize that though, right? Some of the world leaders anyway. Some of the things that are close to us, example, the air we breathe, are part of a global system. So I think this here could be a multiple, remember tell us student when we see a multiple choice question. So this could be a multiple choice question. Remember, this is but this is not primary school, right? This is tertiary education, right? So at primary school, they may have said the environment is air, water, and land. But here now we see in the environment is consistent of three main, you know, like regions. And you have like the local environment, the regional environment, and the global environment, right? So this could be, I mean, they could probably put a little mark on this here, that at this level, then the way it's defined is that the environment is consistent of three, if you want to say three, you know, sub-environments, right? Or three regions, you have the local environment, the regional environment, and the global environment. And like I said before, at the top of this lesson, remember, Joel did mention something, but remember I said that we will be doing environmental risk assessments. And if you wonder why I'm talking about that here, because when you do an EIE, an environmental risk assessment, right? You have to look at the impact to all three regions, the local environment, the regional environment, and the global environment, right? So just if you could just mark it off that this could be a potential question, right? Remember, it's multiple choice, so you know there'll probably be one wrong one there or a wrong combination of answers, but what you're looking for, what makes up the environment is, you know, a combination of local, regional, and global content anyway. So the environment encompasses the physical resources of the earth, including air, water, and land, and raw materials, the living resources of animals and plant life, and human population. It also includes how all of these things relate to each other, right? Let me see if I have any more. If not, yeah, okay, so I'll just kind of share two thoughts there. So, for those who probably did any science subjects before, you probably may be familiar with what is called the food chain, right? So when they say these things relate to each other, you would know that there's something called the food chain, like I guess a simple one could be like, like plankton, not from SpongeBob though, but from the sea. And then you may have like like a water beetle that is going to feed on the plankton. Then you may have a small fish that feeds on the water beetle. Then you have a larger fish that feeds on the smaller fish. Then you may have man, right? So all of these things are related to each other. I don't want to spend too long on that, though, but just in case you remember that or you're not familiar with that, there's something called the food web. And there's also something called, well, the food chain, sorry, first, and then the food web, right? You put more than one chains together, you make up a food web, right? So there is a relationship between all living things, whether or not, they be classified as, like herbivores, carnivores, and even, like the plants then, like the photosynthetic plants themselves. So there is a relationship between, all things that are on the planet. I was going to draw it, but then again, I just sort of discussed it, right? So I wouldn't bother draw it again. I was gonna draw a food chain there for you, but I think if you understand it a bit, that is what is meant by the term relation. And there is also those relationships are defined, right? I mean, if it's not in the book, it's not in the book, right? Those relationships are defined by some words, right? For those of us who know those relationships between plants and animals, like some of them could be said to be, like a commensalism relationship or a symbiotic relationship. Those are words that they use to describe those types of relationship, or a parasitic relationship, right? So like if you have, I guess, I mean, those of us who are familiar, I guess, with just a long story short, the movie Finding Nemo, you'd have probably realized that I guess the clownfish in it then, right? He would have lived in something called an anemone, right? And that in itself is kind of toxic then to other fishes except in that fish, right? So there are relationships. I suppose that one could be said to be a commensalism relationship, because in a commensal relationship, the fish gets protection, but in return, the fish cleans the anemone, right? It cleans it then, right? So there are these relationships that exist between living things. And just to let you know, there are proper words for it, right? So if I use anyone you're not familiar with, could probably just write down one. None of these will come. I'm just trying to do the explanation to tell you that these relationships are very much defined by a food chain. And then there are proper names for those relationships, like commensalism is one where both parties benefit, right? A really nice example of that is if, other than Finding Nemo, is if you have noticed, well, I mean, I guess most people don't have, you know, like animals around them anymore, but you must have noticed like cattle, if you have seen it like on television and stuff, like cattle, cows and whatever, then like they would normally have, like a egret on their back, right? A bird next to them. And that's a commensal relationship, because I think they say the bird gets, a place to rest and maybe some form of protection. And in return, the bird would actually, pick out the ticks from off the animal anyway, right? So just to let you know that they are proper names for those relationships anyway, right? That I'm sure that some of you all know, right? So weather is all about what is happening to the Earth's atmosphere. The atmosphere is a very thin layer of gases that surround our planet. About 80% of the mass of the atmosphere exists within just 20 kilometers of the Earth's surface in a sub-layer called the troposphere. Now, there's another one, right? So I'll mention it one time, even if they don't mention it here one time. It's mentioned later on in the class, right? So the troposphere then is what you can see. Just to let you know that, we'll go through it again, right? So about 80% of the mass of the atmosphere exists just within 20 kilometers of the Earth's surface in a sublayer called the troposphere. So what you see with your eyes, if you have looked up in the morning, sky or whatever have you, and even I guess the night sky, is what is called the troposphere. There's a layer on top of that. Now, the reason for talking about this is I suspect this could be a question. There's a layer on top of the troposphere known as the stratosphere, right? And you'll find like when we get into pollution and like global warming and stuff, the ozone layer and thing, right? The ozone layer and the ozone layer depletion, it's not in the troposphere, but it's in the layer on top of the troposphere, right? So again, remember it's multiple choice. If they were to ask, like where is global warming, like where the, where the ozone gases. I'll talk about that as we go along too, right? But where the ozone layer gases found, the ozone layer is not found in the troposphere. Case in point then, to make it simple for you, you cannot see the ozone layer, but you could see the troposphere. So by deduction then, the ozone layer is above the troposphere and the stratosphere, right? In addition to that, when we come to that later on, if not today, next week, the ozone layer can't see it at all because remember it's gases, right? But they have ways, I'll talk about that, scientists have ways of, estimating, the depletion to the ozone layer, right? But just think of that the ozone layer, when we come to pollution, it's not in the part that you can see, but it's in the part that is above, the troposphere, right? So air in the troposphere is warmed by the sun, more so over tropics than the polar regions. This causes differences in air pressure. The weather we experience is largely caused by these pressure differences called the barometric pressure, right? Air moving over warm water tends to become more moist. This moisture is likely to be deposited as rain as the air rises over cooler land, right? So let's see, there's another slide on this. Okay, I think there is. We're done with climate again and weather. So if the weather is what we feel at any particular moment, the climate is what we experience over a longer period. Measurement of weather variables demonstrate that there are consistent differences in the weather in different parts of the globe. But we all should know that, right? Anyway, let me read out and explain at the end. Different regions have different climates. Example, the Arctic. For example, Russia. Well, Russia is, I think the coolest, right? But you also have, trying to remember this one. It didn't come to mind, right? But Russia is pretty much very cool, right? Temperate, desert. For example, I guess certain parts of Saudi Arabia, Africa, India, subtropical, and of course we could be classed as tropical, right? I was trying to remember the name. There's a pretty cool part of the world, if anybody knows it, that about maybe 10-15 years ago they had actually found a frozen mastodon there. The prehistoric, so-called prehistoric animal. You could probably check that up on YouTube anyway. They had found a frozen baby in the ice that was that I don't know how much years it was there anyway, right? Anyway, let me go back. There's some things I thought need clearing up, right? So this thing about weather, right? There's something that we need to understand, right? That weather is influenced by air pressure or pressure, right? So so this could be something. I mean, so pressure has an influence on weather, right? For example, if the pressure is low, I don't know if you want to write this down somewhere. So remember they said differences in pressure. So a difference in pressure means the pressure could be high or low, hence a difference, right? I want to figure that, right? Pressure could be high. And I guess if you think of this like a mathematical term then, which I don't want you all to think about it like that, but to get a difference, remember difference means a minus. So pressure could be high. I'm just going to put here, normal atmospheric pressure, by the way, is one ATM, 1 atmosphere, right? So let's say the normal atmospheric pressure. So like today, could be, I guess I'm just going to say like 1 atmosphere, 1 ATM and over. So I'll just put 2, right? Just to symbolize that it could be high then, right? So the higher the pressure, I don't know if you all know this, that's supposed to be a 2, right? The higher the pressure, that's 2 ATM and not it looks like Zitra, right? But that's supposed to be 2 ATM. But the higher the pressure, the better the weather. I don't know if you know that, right? So like a day like today, I mean, the last time I looked out, it was sunny, blue skies. Normal atmospheric pressure is 1, but I've chosen to use 2 to symbolize that it's a very good day, right? But low pressure, right? Whenever you listen to the weather news, whoever you listen to, if it's Sigoni on, TV6, I think CN3 has a young guy there anyway now, right? But, whenever there is like, bad weather approaching, and I was going to say storm, but we don't get too much of storms in this part of the world anyway. In this part of the Caribbean, and most normally pass us, right? But the next time you listen to them, you'd hear them, or see if you remember hearing this phrase, they would say a low pressure system is approaching. See if you remember that phrase. See if that sounds similar from listening to the news. A low pressure system is approaching, right? So low pressure is associated with bad weather. I don't know if you want to write this down, because like I said, it's multiple choice. Low pressure system is associated with bad weather. High pressure is associated with good weather. And like I said, typically the good weather is going to be 1 ATM, but I wanted to minus it now. So it didn't make sense, put 1. I put a bigger number like 2 to symbolize a very good day. So low pressure here, we can say like the low pressure is 0.5. Typically a good day, and I'll say it again, normal atmospheric pressure, if you don't know that, is measured by a barometer. That's the name of the instrument, and it's said to be normal atmospheric pressure is 1 ATM. That's like a constant. I have chosen to say 2 to symbolize it's a very good day, right? So the difference in atmospheric pressure, see if you understand what I was talking about, this would be 2 minus 0.5 is going to give us the barometric pressure is going to be 1.5, right? So the difference, right? This causes differences in air pressure, and the differences influence whether or not we're having a good day or a bad day, right? So take a note of that. Maybe for yourself, who knows if it shows up a multiple choice, like which of the following pressure is associated with, I'm just making up a question, right? Like with, I don't know if they will say bad weather, boy, but maybe with a tropical storm or something, and you see high pressure, low pressure, something is going to be low pressure. It's going to be low pressure, right? What is the differences in pressure called? It's called, the barometric pressure, right? And again, maybe for yourself too, like I said, the next time, even today, if you're listening to weather news, just listen to them. If once you have something in the region, come into Trinidad, you hear them say a low pressure system is approaching, right? So I felt that needed some explanation, right? So that's why I came back to that slide, but we did pass that slide. Just felt that wanted some explanation, right? All right, so we were actually on this slide here, right? Climate, I think this was simple. I was talking about different parts of the world have different climates, Arctic, temperate, desert, subtropical, tropical, right? So I think we covered that, and we would be classed as more tropical. I think places like Malaysia could be classed as subtropical. All the Caribbean countries typically is tropical, right? So the weather measured over millions of years, when measured over millions of years, the Earth has gone through some dramatic shift in climate, right? There have been 4 major ice ages, the last of which came to an end about 10,000 years ago, right? I don't know if you all have seen, I know, I mean, you all work, and for me, I work as well, but like whenever I'm from the TV, I mean, it's a smart TV, so I kind of go on YouTube, and, I've seen, I think this week here, they had some really bad floods. I don't know if you all saw that in Germany, in Belgium, in Northern Ireland as well. I don't know if you all have seen it. Germany is like a catastrophe. That's the word that they use. It's like a bomb ripped through parts of Germany, right? Houses, cars in the road, sink into the road. If you get some time, you can look at it. And what they said was the cause of it. Well, they said global warming, right? I mean, not to put the blame on global warming all the time, but of course, the Netherlands, so those who know the Netherlands is actually under sea level. So part of it was actually flooded. Germany, no, is not quite under sea level, but they had it really bad. If when the class finished and you're on YouTube, just check up, just put up flooding in Germany and you'd see they have a lot of people died by the way, right? There's what talking about it. It's not just environmental here, but a lot of persons died, a lot of persons still missing, they're still searching for them. And for that part of the world, then that is strange, right? So if you wonder why I said this, is that the scientists would have mentioned global warming, and they also mentioned um, something to do with the moon in terms of the moon sort of, like wobbling a bit, right? So I'm not too sure if we on this part of the earth will get any effects of that, but it seemed to be a lot of effects is in Europe at the moment, right? You only have to look at it on YouTube and you'll see the extent of the damages anyway, right? I'm not too sure if, we do have people here who don't believe in a long lifespan to the earth. And again, this is not the place to talk about that. But for those who do, this latter line will make some sense. There have been 4 major ice ages, the last of which came to an end about 10,000 years ago. I do believe that, right? Just for those who don't know, I do believe the Earth has had a longer lifespan than what the textbooks have said anyway, right? So moving on, I realize that everybody have the cameras off. So I don't know. I know Joel had his own on and off, so I don't know. Sometimes it's difficult to tell if you're there if you're not there, especially like when you're teaching and it's sometimes like we use the faces to see if you're getting it or are we doing too much, are we doing too little, right? But again, if you probably don't have the use of the camera, just let me know if you're okay with these things. I don't think there is a question here talking about the Earth being, subjected to climate change over millions of years. I don't think that's a question. I think it's just good knowledge though, right? So measurements of the Earth's atmosphere over the last 150 years, which is not long, I guess. That's about since the 18th century, isn't it? About 1840. Show the temperature of the atmosphere has increased by around 1 degree Celsius. This might be enough to trigger long-term changes in the weather. And the question is, do you think that the weather is different now from when you were a child? Anybody with that latter one? Do you think the weather is different now from when you were a child?
Yeah, I would say
Yes,
yes.
right? Yeah. I mean,
When it was a whole wife tale, but the sun tend to be a bit hotter than it was
a
about
bit
20
hotter.
years ago as a child growing up.
Yeah, well, I guess Joanna, some of you are around my age, or some of you may be older anyway,
It was
right? Or
only,
younger. Yeah. But like I sort of remember, like growing up, just a long story short, that to me the temperature never used to be like the way it is like on a typical September day. September is the hottest month, like 34 degrees Celsius and stuff. I can't remember it being that hot. I mean, I did remember like in the 20s when I was growing up anyway. And on a very hot day may have been like 31. But now in the month of September and stuff, you find that's about the hottest month, right? You'll find like 33, 34 degrees Celsius. And now, by the way, these facts have been proven. I'll share with these later on, right? If I don't have to call the data now or call it later on, but these facts have been proven that the Earth atmosphere have increased by 1 degree Celsius. Um, so that's not debatable, that's measurable, that there have been a temperature increase over the Earth's surface. And what is debatable though, right? What is debatable though is that there are those who say that the temperature increase is man-made, so they attribute it to global warming. But then there are those who say, see if you understand where the lesson is going, where the temperature increase then didn't have to do with man, but it have to do with the natural cycles of the Earth. For example, the Earth could be going through like a next shift then, right? So not to call his name too much, but you all know Donald Trump. We all know Donald Trump, but he was one of those who, one of the first things he did when he was the president of America, he came out of the environmental protection then. And if you know that he came out of all well, I mean, these things are voluntary, like groupings then, like conventions, then he came out of it. He took America out of it. So America was not part of the Earth, like climate change conventions. He came out of that. And the reason for that was that he believed that like what's happened now is, yes, they have been increased industrialization, but a large part of what is happening has been due to the natural shift with the earth then. So I think scientists will split along that line. So is it caused by man, or is it just the earth is going through another cycle, right? Of course, the present president, Joe Biden, has rejoined all of those earth-friendly conventions, right? For those who know anyway, right? So you may wonder why I'm talking about all of this, because remember, I do say that there is a diploma with this, and this is where this goes, right? This is where these discussions go at the diploma level. We don't have it, we don't offer it, but I guess somebody could do it via online forum. If you do, when I mean online, a foreign provider, right? Shields or RRC or one of those guys in them there. We do have students on that, just to let you know. I mean, we do have a partnership with Shields, but we don't have much students. In fact, we don't have none now, but in years gone by, we had about 2-3 students on the environmental diploma, right? So the climate, right? There's a real concern that the atmosphere, sorry, is being altered by emissions of greenhouse gases. I'll come back to that at the end of the slide. If global warming were to trigger changes in the earth climate, this could potentially have very serious consequences, as they put in the blame on, just look at, like I said, YouTube, when you finish off this class today, you'll see the blame for the flooding in Germany has gone to climate change, right? So what are greenhouse gases? So if you want, I can tell you now, again, a lot of this, if you have your book, a lot of this is dealt in the second part of the book. But greenhouse gases are those gases that will trap in the sun rays and not allow the sun rays to come, well, to leave, right? There's a difference. I don't have to go into all of this now though, but I'm just trying to say something on greenhouse gases here, right? So greenhouse gases is what is responsible for what we call global warming. That should be the sun I was trying to draw there, right? And this would be, well, okay, I guess I could use the earth down here. Yeah, let me just use the earth down there, right? So the sun rays normally will come and shine on the earth, right? And normally, I mean, most of it is reflected back, right? But greenhouse gases, what they say is a layer of gas, and you'll be surprised, a lot of you know the gas already, you know. When I say it, you'll know it. So there's a layer of that gas that is around the earth's surface, and it stays there. So when the sun rays come in, it's like over the last 150 years, then it has been so much of those gases being pumped out, and it stays there. So when the sun rays try to leave, it cannot leave, or some of it cannot leave. So it stays, it comes in, but it cannot leave, and it stays around the earth, heating up the earth's surface, hence the term global warming. Look at right here, global warming. So just remember this and don't get it mixed up. Well, I don't think I discussed the other one. There's another one, which is ozone depletion, but that's a different gas altogether. So the gas that is linked to global warming, those gases are called greenhouse gases. And anyone know what is the main greenhouse gas? I'm starting to write it.
Carbon dioxide.
Yeah, good old-fashioned carbon dioxide, CO2, right? Good old-fashioned carbon dioxide. But what they say as you go to the slide just now is all of the emissions and the chimneys and stuff, they have been releasing more than, right? More than like the last 150 years ago. I mean, it didn't even have factories, I mean, I suppose in the 17th century did. The end of the 17th century was the end of what we call this, well, around the Industrial Revolution then. Man started to harness steam and whatever have you, right? But definitely the 16th century, 15th century, you still had people on, horses, and I guess even if you had, vessels, it was more or less water driven or wind driven. Well, a water turbine then will turn the vessels on them. Kind of like what if you're familiar with any shows from Louisiana, that part of the States, those big vessels, right? But it wasn't really steam driven anyway. But I mean, definitely comparing that to now, we have a lot more factories. So they have actually attributed this to the increase in CO2 levels, which is responsible for that extra increase in the 1 degree Celsius in the earth that I said is measurable. And, that is a proven fact though, that the temperature has gone up a bit, right? And that is responsible for, they say like every storm season, there are a couple of category 5 storms. It's like a normal thing now. There's like one after the other anyway. So those things have been much more or less been proven, right? I guess other than some people still saying that some of what is happening is due to like natural things within the earth anyway, right? But I mean, I think climate change is attributed to an increase in CO2 over the last 150 years anyway. I mean, let's clear that slide there. So I think that's an exam question, eh? You know, like what is the main gas responsible for global warming, right? Now it have more greenhouse gases. They're like methane. If you want to write down another one, I mean, just because it's multiple choice, right? I mean, methane. I'll just put this symbol here for your CH4. Methane or methane, depends on what part of the world you're from, I guess, right? CH4, right, is another greenhouse gas, but it's not that bad. The main one is CO2. Just remember that. I do believe this is a passive question. The main gas responsible for global warming, or what could be classed as a greenhouse gas, is CO2. Good old-fashioned CO2, what you are exhaling. But what you exhale is in balance with the earth. What is not in balance with the earth is like chimneys and huge factories and whatever have you that give off all of these emissions, right? All right, now in your book, trying to see how much I can do. In your book, at the end of every chapter, there are some questions, right? So maybe at the end of today, we can just go to the back of the chapter and see the questions we can do then, right? Before I send you a paper by next week, Sunday, I'll send you a paper tomorrow. By next week, Sunday, we can start to look through it and start doing the questions from it anyway, right? But today, we'll use at the end of every chapter, there's some questions here. Plus, some of them is built into the slide itself as well. Just trying to get to do, and at the same time, do a fairly good job of filling in the gaps when NEBOSH is leaving out here, right? So habitat, every living thing has a habitat. Just in case you don't know what the word habitat means, is a place where plants and animals live, right? So I guess your habitat could be your home, right? A habitat is where plants and animals live. So temperate, shelter, moisture, availability of oxygen, and the presence of food are essential for a thriving habitat for, I guess, plants and animals, right? Fish need to live in water. In marine fish, example, a cod cannot survive in a freshwater river and is only found in the sea. Simply to say that, you know, they have a specific habitat then, right? So there's an activity here. If you have your book, you may, remember I tell you I didn't bring it up on the full view. If you have your book, it's on page 7. I don't know if you want to do all of them. Maybe you can do it for homework or something. They ask you to match up these plants and animals with their habitat. So I don't know if you want, I could just do 2 for you, and maybe next week we can come back and look at it if you have a look at it anyway. If you try to figure it out, some may need some research, but it's just to match up the plants and animals with their habitat, meaning where they live, right? So I can do an easy one. I don't want to do too much, but think of it here, what I'll just do one, right? And I'll do an easy one, right? I'll do one that doesn't require any research. I mean, one that so we'd all understand, right? So where could seaweeds be found? Seaweeds could be found in the alpine mountain. No. Seaweeds could be found in a pond or lakeside. I'll read on because this is seaweed. It's not a lakeside, right? Heat or moorland. These are things you could research. I have done it already, right? Is seaweed found in the hot desert? No. Is seaweed found in intertidal rocks? Yes, because they mentioned tide. So the answer here, 1, seaweeds will be found in B. Yes, I know it's a bit small in this slide, right? But those of us who have the buckets page are 7. If you can do it out for me for next week, research it a bit, right? Some of them really nice when you research them. So research them out and we can match them up next week before we start the class, right? So I don't think it's an exam, but I think it's fun. Not everything you learn sometimes is an exam. Sometimes it's good to know where these things are, right? If you don't know what a bull rush is, you could research it. I don't want to tell you everything as yet, right? As you research them, you'll see how simple they are anyway, right? Anyway, so ecosystems. So animals and plants affect the physical environment in which they live. So I'm realizing that T is missing here. Now, again, this is NEBOSH PowerPoint and not mine, right? But there seems to be a T is missing there. The relationship between plants, animals, organisms, and their physical environment is an ecosystem, right? So I suppose you may have heard that term before, right? You know, so I guess a larger compilation of food webs could be described as an ecosystem, right? Herds of animals such as zebra graze on the vast grassland of Africa. What effects could they have on their environment? Right? So I don't know if you want to come in and answer this. I'll read it again for those who probably, if anyone just listen, right? Herds of animals such as zebra graze on the vast grasslands of Africa. What effects could they have on the environment? I'll just take two answers. I hear what you can just tell me if it's good or bad because of the time. Do you think it's a good effect? We have to read this very carefully, or a bad effect.
Will it be a bad effect?
A bad effect. Okay. Anybody else?
So this might have some far-reaching effects as it concerns the oxygen and the carbon dioxide that you spoke about.
Okay. You know, when I looked at it, remember this is not the first time we're teaching this. I've taught this since 2014 to now, right? But when I look at it, though, right, you know, I don't really see too much of a bad effect. You know why? It's like reading it over, though. I suppose there are some bad effects, right? As I said, not too much of bad effects because I suppose there could be overgrazing. You know, for those who know what desertification is, have you ever heard that word? They put desert, but they put another side of it, right? Desertification, meaning like you know, like I heard of animals that could eat all the vegetation, leaving the soil exposed to the elements. Of course, this is in the grasslands of Africa. So I suppose if it's a dry season, it's going to result in like the area becoming a desert then, right? Desertification, if you ever heard about that. So I suppose that is possible, but you know what kind of changed my mind was when I saw things like vast grasslands. You know, I mean, herds of animals such as zebra. I mean, the African grassland and any grassland anyway is going to be huge, right? So I do think sometimes that the effect is not all bad. I think this could still be some sort of equilibrium then with the environment, right? That in other words, then nowhere there did they mention anything foreign, meaning they didn't mention man, right? You know, I think if they had said like another type of animal, like maybe if it was, you know, like cattle that was being, you know, like in a particular area, but this is a zebra. People don't really, you know, take care of zebra then or herd zebra then, right? So I thought this was I mean this happens all the time. If you have seen the movie, and I know we have not, I mean, you must have seen movies with Africa, right? I mean we have all seen Madagascar, right? The second one anyway. I mean, they are zebra all the time, but is it a negative effect to the land itself? Most of the time, the effect is no, right? So, when I mean no, like not a bad effect then, right? So I think this is still the zebra ecosystem then. So there's like a natural balance between this vast grassland, and they contributed, for those who don't know that, you know, they contribute to the fertility of the soil and in terms of the animal drop-ins, right? So they contribute to this grassland being fertile and whatever have you, right? So I didn't quite see it as a negative effect, only if maybe like they had said, if they had said things like man and it was, you know, like you know, like rearing of cattle and animals, but this is really symbolic of natural herds then, zebra in that sense, and I didn't see it as so much of a negative effect. All right, nonetheless, it was just meant for some discussion, right? So back to ecosystems. So ecosystems define the interdependency of different plants and animals and the flow of energy and materials between living and non-living components. So I do like that definition. Thank God it's multiple choice, so you don't have to learn it, right? Ecosystem define the interdependency of different plants and animals and the flow of energy and materials between living and non-living components. Ecosystems are found in rivers and lakes, estuaries. I'll clear up what you don't know at the end, right? Forests, wetlands, Arctic tundra, coral reefs. right? So all of those ecosystems, maybe the only one you don't know there, you must know what the Arctic tundra is. That's a bit, the colder regions anyway. There are a lot of shows on TV that I look at. If you have seen on National Geographic or History, right? I don't know what station they show on now. Like, I think one of them is called Alone. There's another one. For the life of me, when I sit in front of the computer, I just can't remember these shows, right? But or the things I'm trying to remember, right? But there's one. I'm sure there are a couple of wilderness shows. Below Zero, that's the name of it. Below Zero or Life Below Zero. They show like not survivors, but survivalists then who go on to live in these parts of the world, right? So like the Arctic tundra is where you still have some vegetation, but it's snow, right? Yes, it's snow then, but you still have, like the pine trees and whatever have you. It's not totally frozen, right? You still have some plants and animal there. So estuary may be the only one that you don't know. We should know what a river and what a lake is. We have them in Trinidad. Forests, we have wetlands, we have the Caroni swamp and stuff. Um, I don't know if I want to mention the name of that here. The Caroni swamp is what we call a Ramsar site. If anybody know what that means. Ramsar, Ramseer, is a convention, a worldwide convention that protects wetlands. And Trinidad and Tobago, the Caroni Swamp is a designated Ramsar site. Ramsar, by the way, if you find it sound like a funny name, I think it's a place, well, it is a place where they had the convention, and I think it was like in the Middle East, right? I don't know if you know that when, I'm sure you all remember when Mr. Obama was in Trinidad, Barack Obama. I don't know if you remember why he came to Trinidad for. I know we know he was here, and you probably thought he came for a motorcade, but he didn't, right? He didn't come for a motorcade. He came for an environmental convention. And coming out of that, we have what is called the Treaty of Port of Spain. I don't know if you all know that. It's an environmental treaty for, well, but for the environment, right? So wherever you have these conventions, sometimes where these decisions are made, the convention takes on the name of the place, right? So we have the Treaty of Port of Spain. Mr. Obama was here, and like I said, if you forgot why he was here, a lot of people just forgot why he was here. They thought he came because he won the election. That was the first time around, but that's not why he came. He came because it was on the Hyatt, right? What we call the Hyatt, and where Parliament and stuff was actually built. It wasn't built for Barack Obama, it was built for a convention, but it was being hosted in Trinidad and Tobago. Anyway, long story short, back to the Middle East. I think it was Iraq or Iran or one of those places is where the name Ramses come from.
Iran, 1971.
Yeah, 1971. And well, the Caroni Swamp is a designated Ramsar's worldwide protected wetland, and for those who don't know that. Anyway, I was saying, you see how much information I give you when, these courses do have that in it, but anyway, right? An estuary, this is the one I said you may not know. An estuary is where seawater and fresh water meets. That's called an estuary. I'll say it again. An estuary is where seawater and fresh water meets. So if you think about the Mosquito Creek, the creek then, right? The creek, you have the river coming out there, and it meets the seawater. And like just at the mouth of the river, you are going to find like a mix because the sea is there, but the river is also there. So you're going to find a mix of seawater and fresh water, and that's called an estuary. And you do have certain plants, fishes, organisms then that prefer like that mixture of seawater and fresh water anyway, right? So take a note of it if you don't know that. An estuary, next time you're driving on the creek, you know that, well, not the part with the wall, the part with the river is that with the river coming out into the sea then. And again, if you know any place like that, I think Queen Anne Beach has a river that comes out in it. Vestany Beach has a river that comes out in it. So just at the point where the river flows into the sea, or where the seawater may be, like backing up into the river, that's called an estuary, right? A place where seawater and fresh water meets anyway. The rest we should know, right? Coral reefs and stuff in, Tobago and stuff. If you have never seen it, you should, I guess, but borders opening. But Tobago was never really close in that sense. I suppose if you have been, you have taken your precautions and I am not going anywhere this year, though. I'm not traveling anywhere, hopefully not, right? But I guess maybe next year, or whenever you decide to go to Tobago, go to the coral reefs. I bet you'll be surprised at what you see. You'll be surprised to see the amount of plants and animals. And if you have never seen it, you'll be surprised to see grass. There's actually grass in the sea, right? They call it sea grass, right? Just as what you have on land, but you'll be surprised to see them anyway. All right, back to this slide, right? By again, in terms of exam, someone is calling, right? But I'll put it on mute. In terms of exam, though, like I said, I mean, I suppose you see that I am trying a lot of explanation here, and I do, like I said, my degree, one of my degrees in this, but I suppose they do have questions here on habitat and ecosystem. I think we did the one on climate and CO2. I think that's an exam question. This could be one, but remember it's multiple choice. And I mean, this could be one, like the definition of an ecosystem. Define the interdependency of plants and animals and the flow of energy. So I think that could be a definition, right? Biodiversity. Let me read out this one because I know this could also be one as well, right? So biodiversity, the Earth's biological resources. What I'll do, I'm going to read about 3 slides and then stop, right? Just to kind of push the work a bit. So the Earth's biological resources are vital to economic and social development by providing us with sustainable materials, maintaining the quality of our air, soil, water, and climate, contributing to our health and enjoyment of life. Just think about that, the Earth's biodiversity, right? The UN Convention on Biological Diversity aims to coordinating the international efforts to maintain biodiversity. Did I miss a slide? I think I did. Biodiversity expresses the enormous variety of wild plants and animals on the Earth. Not all areas are equally biodiverse. Tropical regions like ours have more species than temperate regions. An area of land or an ecosystem that contains a high number of different species of animals or plants per unit area would be described as having a high biodiversity. Like I said, I'm trying to not tell you too much, but at the same time tell you enough that you understand this thing. I don't know if you all know that you can measure that. Biodiversity could be measured. I don't know if you all have done anything like that. I don't know if you all know what they make something called a grid, GRID. This is how they measure biodiversity. It's really easy to make. You could take PVC and make it. I don't know if you all have ever seen anybody do that, right? You take like PVC, maybe like I guess 10 feet by 10 feet. 10 feet is pretty long, boy, but maybe, okay, I'm too short, and maybe, I guess maybe 6 feet by 6 feet, right? And they would run a string, right, through it, and they make a grid, right? For those who know, again, there's so much of a long story here, something, but just to get you to understand, so anybody can make this. They run string in it and they put it like this. They put strings on this side too, and they make a grid. This is how they measure biodiversity. They will take this, if we assume this to be 6 feet by 6 feet, or 6 by 4 or something, right? You could just make up one anyway, right? So they'll put that on how they measure biodiversity. They will take that. I don't know when my marker stopped. In the midst of me teaching the markers, it just suddenly disappeared, right? Yeah. So they will take it and they will drop it on the land. You place it flat on the ground, and how they measure that, like biodiversity, they check the number of organisms in each grid. These things are very small, and like the size of this I'm talking about. These are not large grids I'm talking about, right? So that's how they measure biodiversity, right? And what they have found out though is that, the tropic regions then have more biodiversity than the temperate regions anyway, right? So I'll leave that there. They have more to it, but this is a simple school grid. This is one you could do in school. Secondary school students do this anyway, right? I suppose at the UE level, I did teach, I don't know if you all know that, right? I did teach environmental management for the University of the West Indies. And so there are larger grids. You can take it to the Caroni Swamp and whatever have you, right? But I just show you a simple one that this could be, when they say per unit area, this is what they're talking about. Per unit area is this here. This is per unit area. One square then is per unit area. That's what they call per unit area, right? 1 square is, per unit area. So per unit area, tropical regions have more species and plants than temperate regions anyway. All right, moving on, right? I just said I mentioned them because the things here just to understand every line, right? So biodiversity, let's try to finish off that slide. So get it to move now. It's not moving, right? So the Earth's, I think we read this already, did we? Yeah, we read that already. So let's take a, now, okay, let me slow down one more time again. Biodiversity, I think, is a question. I've said that already, right? I think biodiversity is a question, right? And I see it's about 10 past 11, so in a bit I'll stop and try to look at some of the questions in the book. What exactly is pollution? Is it just caused by industrial activities? Look at the photograph of the dead fish on the beach. Why do you think the fish has died? Well, of course, the answer is pollution, right? I remember teaching this a year and a student looked at it and he said the fish is out of the water. That's why the fish has died, right? But I suppose you can look in the background though and see garbage in the background there, right? So pollution usually means the presence of contamination in the environment, which can potentially cause adverse effects on the environment and or life. Environmental pollution usually involves a source of containment, a target, and an impact, right? So I think the lesson's starting to get good now, you know, but let's slow down a bit, right? So again, these definitions can come. What makes pollution pollution is that the effect is an adverse effect. Remember, you are getting multiple choice. I've seen questions where they just tell you that there is an effect, but it's not just an effect, it's an adverse effect, right? So pollution usually means the presence of contamination in the environment, which can potentially cause adverse effects on the environment and on life, right? Well, in that case, I guess human life too. Environmental pollution usually involves a source of containment. I'll just tell you what they're talking about just now, a target and an impact. Now, this is actually the start of an EIE, an environmental impact assessment, but just to make it short and for us to move on, the source of containment then could be like, let's say a leaking pipeline. That's the source, right? The target could be, let's say, a river or the fishes in the river, and the impact will be the death of the fishes, right? I wish I could have write that down though, right? Because I'll say it again, this is the start of an EIE. I don't think we'll finish it today. The source, I'll use another example, right? The source could be a vessel that was leaking oil, an offshore vessel, right? The source could be a vessel. You could write out the word vessel. I just put in diagrams to make it interesting, right? The target here could be a river, but I'll draw a fish, right? So it could be fishes in the river, right? And the impact will be, well, the death of the fishes in the river, right? So they are dead, right? And if you're okay with that, I will just move on, right? The source of containment, because it have better examples coming up. But again, these are, for those who don't know what I mean by an EIE, right? It is a risk assessment. For just so those who don't know, right? An EIE is a risk assessment. But for want of a better time though, I mean, and more time, you know how a risk assessment is started with, I mean, it is a table, right? A risk assessment is a horizontal table. But you know, a risk assessment was started with what is the hazard? You know, like what are the hazards? What I'm saying is that in an EIE, it doesn't start off like that. It starts off like, what is the source of containment? The columns then of the table, right? In a environmental risk assessment, pretty much similar to a risk assessment, but for a risk assessment, and I don't know why this marker has disappeared on me, right? That for a risk assessment, you know, the first column, right? Like I'm drawing it there, but it's not, I don't know if it's drawing on your side, it's not drawing on my side. Just trying to draw the columns on the risk assessment table. And nothing again, right? But you all see what I'm trying to do, right? It's not happening though. I'm not too sure why. Let's try again, right? So with a risk assessment, you know there are columns, right? Like what is the hazard is the first column. But with an EIE, remember you start off now with something else. You start off with what is the source of containment? Like what is the target? What is the impact? So that's what I say is the start of an environmental impact assessment. And then you'd eventually end up with the same risk formula, likelihood by consequences. But remember, in terms of the environment, we're not saying hazard, we're saying like where the pollution coming from then, the vessel, right? Instead of saying hazard, we say like, okay, the Like, well, the impact then, what is the target? A river, the air, the land will be the target, right? So in an EIA, which I've just briefly mentioned here, again, if you're doing STOW, environmental impact assessments are a requirement of STOW, meaning if you're in safety and you're helping a company do it, element 8 is environmental risk assessments. But what a lot of the people don't like, the auditors do, like when the company pass off a safety risk assessment as an environmental risk assessment, right? They wanted to do a proper environmental risk assessment. In other words, then the headings of the table will have to change. Instead of saying task, like what task you're doing, like a worker working at height, it would now be the source of containment is a vessel, right? So the headings change. Next week, I'll kind of go into this a bit more. Now, I would have one in the next slide. So let me just go to the one in there. I was just trying to tell you that with an environmental risk assessment, the heading's going to have to change to reflect environmental things then. Instead of saying hazard and the risk to people, it wouldn't be to people, it'd be to the environment. It'd be like to a river, to a stream, to like to the air then, right? Air pollution. It wouldn't be to a person because it's not a safety risk assessment you're doing, but it is an environmental risk assessment that you're doing. Think you understand that a bit? And those of us, like I said, if you're in a company doing STOW, you get really good environmental marks for element 8 if you do an environmental risk assessment. I know one of the auditors, I don't know if anybody know him, I wouldn't call his last name, but I know one of the auditors, right? He will stop an audit in element 8 if he know that the company trying to pass off a normal risk assessment for an environmental risk assessment. Rajesh is his name. The reason is that his master's is in environmental. So he don't like to see things where you're calling something an environmental risk assessment, but it not using the words then that is found in the environmental field. You're still putting people, but in environmental risk assessment, you should consider the environment. That's why it's called an environmental risk assessment, right? Right, so there's one here. Again, I don't know if you can see all of it, but your book, those of us, if you find it, I remember I don't want to try to attempt to put it up, and next thing you see it bump more of the system, right? But your book have it on it. If you could look at it, this is on page 9. I think they have the same example as well. Just trying to find it though. Right, they have the same thing here, the smoky emissions on page 10, right, of your book. The smoky emissions from a power station chimney, right? Remember what we covered in the start of the course. I tell you that the environment now, the first thing I tell you for exam today was that the environment could be seen to be local, regional, and global. And when you read this, you're gonna see that, right? The smoky emissions from a power station chimney might have a local impact on local residents, right? So remember, tell you where you're getting at here now, that you had to learn that the environment was local, regional, global. And if you could slow down a bit, you'll see like the source of containment would actually be the power station chimney, right? However, the emissions will also contain carbon dioxide, one of the main greenhouse gases. And this has the potential to affect the global climate through global warming. This is covered in more detail in element 2.1. So you're seeing here that we're getting into tertiary education now, right? It started off a bit basic, but you see in the EIA starting to develop, you're starting to see where they're starting to say that pollution there not just affects air, water, and land, but it affects the local environment, the residents, the local, environment, but it could also affect, in terms of the whole earth, if it's something like a greenhouse gas, like carbon dioxide anyway, right? Cars, exhaust fumes from road vehicles is one of the largest sources of air pollution in towns and villages. I'm gonna leave out this one here a bit. That's just a what you know question, right? Electricity use, we are not directly responsible for the emissions from power stations, though we do have some indirect responsibilities because of our demands for electricity. Let me see this one, right? What sources of environmental pollution do you think your organization is responsible for? Write these down, distinguishing between those sources that your organization is directly responsible for and those where it has some indirect responsibilities. I guess what I'll do the explanation here, right? If you have the book, you read the whole thing. What you're trying to see is that like our demand then for electricity is what is driving that industry, right? So, like, why do you have power stations and why do we have chimneys? This is nuclear power here, by the way, right? But why do you have that? It's because, it's the Earth's demand, it's human demand for, I guess, a high standard of living then, right? So that, this in some way, we are indirectly responsible for those industries being there anyway, right? Sustainability, I'll try to read out this 2 and stuff, right? I've seen some practice question. Let me read out, I'm going to skip the practice question and read out all on sustainability first, right? And then come back to the practice question. So sustainability, environmental protection need to be an integral part of social and economic development. The UN held a summit in 1992 to discuss the concept of sustainable development. The UN, I guess they had it in Brazil, because I see in Rio here, Rio Declaration on Environment and Development was issued and sustainable development was defined. I don't know if you all, I remember seeing that on TV. I remember, I guess back then was only one station. I remember seeing this convention on TV, right? And in this convention, the definition for sustainable development was defined. It is defined as the right to development must be fulfilled so as to equitably meet developmental and environmental needs of present and future generation. Again, it's multiple choice. I would say again, this is a question. Every year have a sustainable development question, or every sentence should I say, right? By the way, it's multiple choice. They ask you what does it mean? And I mean, the thing to know here is that sustainable development, watch me a bit with this one. Sustainable development means that you develop in your country, but also the environment. You're not developing your country on the expense of the environment. See if you see it in the definition, right? It's the right for countries to develop. Countries like Trinidad, Guyana, Grenada, third world countries as we call them, right? But you must do that equitably, which means equally meeting your developmental needs of the country then, construction, education. But at that same time, the environment needs to be protected at the same level, right? And it should be in such a way that the development is that for our present generation and the future generation as well. Sustainable development. Most of the definitions, when we read them in a bit, well, the questions are hopefully not running out of time here, that you would see they leave out part of that, like they will leave out future generation, or they leave out present generation, or they leave out development and environment at the same time. But it's equal development of the country, to the environment, and the environment on the same level for both the present and the past generation. Sometimes, of course, not to go into too much of this, but I would just wanted to think about it, because remember, Tali is not now teaching this. I taught it before NEBOSH with UE as well. The question has always been, we always ask students, I don't want you to answer it now, but to think about it. So do you think that Trinidad and Tobago is developing sustainably? Now, over the years of my teaching, the answer for that has changed. There was a time when the answer was no. There was a time when the answer was yes. There was a time when the answer was yes again. And now I wouldn't tell you what the answer is. I think you could make a decision for yourself anyway, right? That do you think Trinidad and Tobago is developing sustainably, right? Like I said, there was a time I taught this, and the answer was fully well yes. Fully well yes. There was a vision for the country. Let me just share something with that. There was a vision for the country back then, 2020, right? It was educational development. GATE was in effect. The environment, was in effect. EMA was established. IMA was established. There was a time the answer for that was yes. For now, I don't think the answer is yes anyway, right? I'm moving on. Remember, till I leave any question, I will come back to it just now. I'll leave it or not. Just trying to finish off sustainable development. Sustainability may help an organization to develop itself and to contribute to global progress. If we carry on as we are, we or our children will eventually find ourselves short of land. Well, I could bring it down to Trinidad terms in a bit, right? Wild spaces or places, wild animals and plant, food, fuel, and other resources, right? And so again, you could substitute some of those words and they say if we carry on as we are, we or our children will be really be out of maybe opportunities then, like in years to come. When you look at, for example, like, I mean, not to share too much, but you look at places like Guyana that is developing right now, right? You look at places like Barbados that, I mean, for those who have been there, I don't know if you know this. Let me just share one thing. Do you know that Barbados is classed as a developed country? Do you know that Barbados is classed as a developed country? Have you ever been to Barbados? You'll be shocked because Barbados looks nothing. It looks like, let me see where you all are from. Barbados looks like Siparia. The capital of Barbados looks like Siparia. There are no high buildings. It looks like Princestown if you're from Princestown. It does not look like San Fernando. San Fernando is more developed than Bridgetown in Barbados, believe it or not. San Fernando, because I guess of the construction taking place there now, and where the hospital is at. There are no big buildings like that. In fact, Tobago, if you have gone to Scarborough is more developed than Barbados. But why is Barbados classed as a developed country? The answer is that they always had, I don't know if you know that, Barbados always had free tertiary education. I don't know if you know that. It had nothing to do with, like, Barbados always had free tertiary education. From what they say, from nursery to tertiary, there was always an emphasis on developing the population then and protecting the environment, because remember, Barbados is heavily dependent on tourism, right? That is shocking. If you have been there, you'll be shocked. I was there. You see nothing different from Siparia. No big businesses, not too much of KFCs. They have their own version of KFC. If you don't know that, they have something called Chiffettes. Starts with a C, Chiffettes, right? If you have been there, right? No big sort of KFC, no sort of Subway, no sort. I mean, I think they have a Subway. They have a Subway, right? But no excessive amount now. But then why are they classed as a developed country? It have nothing to do with what you see on the outside. It have to do with the fact that they were always developing their population and taking care of the environment. So they are classed as a developed country. I don't know if you all know that. And we have all the oil and gas in the world, and we were never, well, I think we were kind of classed as one at a time, but we're not classed as a developed country anymore anyway, right? If you get some time and you have your passport, whenever things ease up, visit Barbados a bit, right? So we need to take action to bring our economies back into line with the capacity of the planet. I think I want to stop there, right? Let me see. I guess we're going to have to stop there, right? So we stop at sustainable development. Let's look at some of the questions they have. I've seen two here, and I'll go to the book to see if I have any more, right? So to recap, to be honest with you, we did do some work, I think, today beneficial for the exam. Let me just mention, I think biodiversity is always there. I think greenhouse gases is always there, which the answer is CO2. Sustainable development question is always there. Look at have one right here, right? But they're easy questions at that. Let's just try this one, and then I'll search through the book. We still, I guess, on the first chapter anyway, and if it have no more, fine. It's about 11:30. I'll let you go, and then in the week I'll send you a question, and we're gonna use that paper next week Sunday to sort of make up some past paper time, right? So let's take a look at this one. I think this is the first one. I believe so. I don't think we left out any. Did it have any that we left out? I don't think so, right? This concept is going to be developed still. This one and this, I remember we now start in EIEs, right? And so when we get into 2.1, I think they said it too, that EIEs is more like in 2.1 or something, right? So this is covered in more detail in 2, right? Which will be 2.1. All right, so back to the question. So biodiversity is a concept used to A, reduce pollution, B, describe the type and number of wild plants and animals living in a given space, C, place a monetary value on wildlife, D, save energy. Best answer is?
I would say B.
B, right? Yeah, B, right? Okay, B. I mean, I suppose biodiversity does reduce pollution, and it does save energy. But how we describe it to the grid and stuff, right? It used to describe it have more plants and animals than living in a given space, right? So maybe that explanation would have given you a clear answer there. Pollution is anything that affects the environment. Why is that wrong? Why is A not the answer? And this is why you should be trigger happy, right? Those who did process safety, you know what I'm talking about. When they give you the paper, remember you have to shade, right, with a pencil. But don't be hurried to shade now. Remember for process safety, we did that. Do all the questions in the booklet first. Do it in the booklet. Don't be hurried to shade. I was asking why you think A is not the answer. A is not the answer, by the way, because pollution have to have what type of effect? What type of effect? I'm trying to point it here.
Adverse or negative effects.
Right. Pollution have to have an adverse effect. So don't be hurried, right? When you say you write an exam, it's only 20 questions, right? Like what you could do, you could really take 20 minutes and do it all in the booklet first. Those who, I'll probably talk about strategy as we get closer to exam, but those who did process safety, we did that same strategy. You do it in the booklet first, just give it a booklet then. Do it in the booklet first, right? Take a pencil and just kind of put a tick on it now. You think, okay, it's A, but it wasn't A because when you read the rest, you'll see it's C. But if you're hurried to shade, you'll find yourself erasing the paper. And remember, these multiple choice papers are computer that's corrected. They just pick up the pencil mark that you put on the grid sheet. So be careful with that, right? So the answer is C. Pollution is the presence of contamination with the potential to cause adverse effect on the natural environment or on life. So very good there. So I don't see any more, but there's some later on. So I wonder if we could just go forward to it. I know we haven't done all of this yet. So, but let's try a little bit still now. It's on page 20. I seen 2 questions there. I guess if you remember something I said at the start of the class, there was a time when you had no textbook. So the fact that this book is published means that these are past paper questions. The first year we ran this, I think we were the pilot school. Not just in Trinidad, we were the pilot school in the world to run NEBOSH course, right? I saw it and I jumped on it because I felt that Trinidad didn't have a NEBOSH environmental qualification, right, in 2014. But at that time, it didn't have any textbook. Right now it have a book. So these questions you see here is not as if they just make this up. This is actually past papers they put here, right? All right, page 20, if I have the correct page. Joel, you just have to listen. I wonder if it's here, boy. Let me see if it's here. No, there's kind of publish it back here. I think this is it. Yes, okay, so these are the questions on page 20, right? Just for Joel. So which best describes the benefits to an organization of pursuing a sound, sustainable strategy? Like, what is the benefits of them, maintaining, like trying to be sustainable then, right? Next week, I'll talk about that a bit if I don't know what that all means, right? But let's see what are some benefits. Being able to buy goods more cheaply from developing countries. No. Paying less taxes. That's quite an obvious no. Benefit of sustainable development. Enhancing their reputation with environmentally and socially aware customers. That sounds like it. Reducing their employment costs, no, right? So remember, sustainable development have to do with protecting the environment and, like your citizens then. So if this is a company, we could think of it as the workers then, like taking care of your workers, but taking care of the environment too. And again, we are out of time. I was just saying that for companies that do that, it is like a boasting point, right? That just to let you know, I mean, do you or have you been familiar with companies that do cleanup programs, like at the beach, they go and they do a cleanup, they go, maybe, but the beach is the most popular one anyway, right? But they do these cleanup campaigns, they publicize it, they have it on Facebook, they have it on YouTube, etc. They have it in their company magazine and stuff. So, like when a customer come and they see, BP contributing this down to Guapo, or Atlantic LNG, should I say, right? Atlantic LNG contributing this to the Guapo Beach facility, right? Or they planted so much of trees, or they clean up the Guapo Beach facility, whatever have you find. I mean, that does go well with those citizens, but you don't have much in Trinidad, but you all are those because you all have decided to do the environmental course, those that are more environmentally, aware, right? All right, next question, and this will be the last one for today. So like I said, these are questions and I do expect them to come again, right? Which best describes sustainable development? Take it.
C, sir.
Which one?
C as in
C. Okay, right, okay. I'll read through all of them now. Ensuring all our needs and wants are met. providing they leave something for the future. That sounds like a lot of Trinidadians, right? Making sure we can provide everything the current population needs. C, equitably meeting developmental and environmental needs of present and future generation, right? I wish I had more time to talk about that, but I don't, right? D, stopping any activity now that harms the environment. It's not just about now. Like, for example, if somebody was cutting down trees and you stop them, that's not sustainable development. For it to be sustainable development, you have to go and replant. If it was cutting down, you have to replant. That's what makes it sustainable. Stopping the cutting down of trees then, or forests. And I mean, trees could be cut down if they were grown for that purpose, right? Like, like for timber. But the thing is, it could be a forest then, right? So it could be replanted, and that is what makes it sustainable. Folks, thanks for your time. Again, hopefully you understood today's task. You should know, like I said, that this is something that most people don't know about me, that I do have an environmental green thumb as well. Literally, I do plant outside. I have tomatoes planted outside. I have I have what again? I do have okra. I don't want to say everything because you might laugh at me, right? And I do have some sweet pepper and cabbages and stuff, right? It's just my yard, but I planted. I have, of course, some trees that I'm bringing up. I actually do my own orange trees. I grew my orange trees from seed. If you want to, these things sell back for $100, but I grew them from seed and I give them away anyway. I don't sell them, I give them away. If you want to know the secret, I can tell you another time, right? So not just safety here, I do have a bit of liking to the environment. And again, having done a degree in it too, I mean, hopefully you kind of pick up that today too. It wasn't just safety for me, but exactly, safety and the environment, right? Folks, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I always say try to do something, relaxing, look at a movie or something. Movies are not very long. If you choose a good one, an hour and a half. Yesterday I was playing, I ride skateboard. I know Joel has laughed at me when I tell you these things. I ride skateboard, believe it or not, and a bit of cycling, and I have a basketball ring outside that I do some shots, right? Some shots. So whatever you do, enjoy your Sunday a bit, enjoy your life a bit. Look at a movie. It's not just about work, right? You'll have chosen an hour and a half to further yourself, and that is commendable, but still get, some relaxation in, right? Enjoy the rest of your day, folks. I'll see you all back next week. I'm stopping